Hello and welcome back as we swing back around to account connection tools and how we interface with AWS. This time focusing on the AWS CLI. So over here in the Orion papers, let's click on account connection tools and then on CLI. So the AWS command line interface, generally referred to as the CLI, is a text-based interface for accessing and administering AWS resources. All commands executed using the CLI are API calls and require API key configuration. So what does it all mean? Well, what we're going to do in this particular lesson is create a new EC2 instance, log into that EC2 instance, install and configure the AWS CLI, and then run some basic commands so we can see how it all works. So in order to do that, the first thing that we need to do is, well, create an EC2 instance that we're going to log into and use. Now, I already have some running, but I'm just going to create a fresh one here for this particular lesson. And I'm going to run through this fairly quickly as we should be very comfortable creating EC2 instances now. I'm just going to use the Amazon Linux AMI T2 Micro. I do need to make sure that I provision it into a proper VPC with a public subnet and enabling auto-assign a public IP address because I want to be able to log into this EC2 instance, so I need to have a public IP address. Make sure that our security group has port 22 open, which it does. Review and launch and install, and then I'll select an existing key pair that I know that I have stored. Great, and it is now creating that EC2 instance for us. So what I'll do is I'll actually name this CLI, just to keep this nice and clean. Now what I need to do is I need to create a user or get a set of access keys in order to configure the AWS CLI once we log in and install it on this particular EC2 instance. So I open up a new tab here, and I'm going to go to IAM, and I'm just going to create a new user for the purpose of this lesson. I'll just call the user CLI, keep it nice and organized. And for type of access, I actually don't have to give this user access to the console. I can just give this particular user programmatic access because what I need is the access key ID and the secret access key in order to configure the AWS CLI. So next, let's click on permissions. And right now, I just won't add any particular permissions. So we'll just click next and review, create user. But what I do definitely need to do is download the CSV that contains the access key ID and the secret access key. So I just downloaded that to my computer, and we'll reference back to that in a minute. So let's go back over here and check on our EC2 instance. That is up and running. So let's click on connect. I'm going to grab the command to connect here. And then let's switch over to the terminal so I can log into this particular EC2 instance. Okay, so I have my terminal over here, and then I have the console here, so we'll be able to see when we run commands from the command line interface, it will affect, and we can see those things in real time in the AWS console as well. So let's go ahead and log into this EC2 instance. Great, now that we're logged in, what we need to do is install the AWS CLI. Now, in order to install the AWS CLI, you will need Python installed version 2.6.5 or higher, which comes pre-installed with this particular Amazon Linux AMI. But if you don't have it installed or don't know how to install it, you can just Google it and find the answer. It's just a simple few sets of commands to run to install Python. But once everything is installed, or if you're using this particular AMI, all you need to do to install the AWS CLI is run the command pip install --upgrade --user AWS CLI. Let's click enter here. Now it's installing the AWS CLI. Great. AWS CLI is now installed. It's that simple. Now to configure the AWS CLI, where we need to input our access key and secret access key, we just need to type in AWS configure. Now it's going to ask for the AWS access key ID for the user that we want to use here. So I'm going to go and open up the CSV file that I downloaded. I'm going to copy the access key here, paste it in. I will do the same for the secret access key. Now for default region name, you can input a region here which will be the default region when you run CLI commands, meaning if you don't specify a specific region in the command, it will default to this particular command. So I'm going to use US East 1. And for default output, there's several different choices you can have here between plain text or JSON. I'm just going to leave it as default, just hit enter here, which will just keep it as a default JSON template output. And that's all you need to do in order to install and configure the AWS CLI. So now what about actually running commands? How do you know what commands are available to run? Well, I have this link open here in my separate tab, which shows us all of the various services and the underlying commands that we can run from the command line interface. And I will put this link in the helpful links section of the appendix of the Orion papers. So viewing all the various services here, let's first go to, let's say, S3. And let's say that we want to create a bucket from the AWS CLI. Well, if we scroll all the way down here in the S3 section, we can see the available commands, which are CP, that'll be for copy, ls will be for list, MB will be for make bucket. So I can click on that, and I can see here that it says create an S3 bucket, and then I can get an example here. And generally, all AWS commands from the CLI start with AWS, followed by the service, followed by the command, then the action that we want to take. So let's go ahead and copy this here and paste this in. And I'm going to have to use a unique name for the bucket that I want to create here. So I'll just call this CLI test bucket. And then just put in a bunch of random numbers, because again, it does have to be unique, and I'll hit enter. Now I did get an error here. It just says that access was denied. Now why is that? Well, we should know that in order to use any AWS resources, users have to have proper permissions set. And if you remember, when I created this CLI user, I didn't set any access permissions. I didn't attach anything to that particular user. So I actually have to go back and do that now in order to run commands for each and every one of these services. So let's open up a new tab here for Identity and Access Management. We'll go to Users. Click on CLI user here. I'll add permissions, and I'm going to add just an existing policy. S3 full access we'll choose here. And then we'll click next and add permissions. Now if I run this command again, we will see now that there was an output and it did make the bucket. So now we can actually go back to the console here, click on S3, and we do now see the bucket being listed here. So now let's go back here. Let's take a look at some other options as well. There's the ls command. So to do that, we can just bring this back up. I can just delete this out. And we can just run the command AWS S3 ls to list all of the buckets currently in our account or in this particular region. And we see it does list the 4 buckets that we currently have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's really that simple to run commands from the CLI. Now we can go ahead and also take a look at other commands from other services if we want to say, let's check out EC2. There's a lot of available commands for this, but let's say we just want to list the details for the current instances that we have running. Well, we can find the command here, describe instances. And if we scroll down here, we can find an example. And it looks like it's just going to be a simple AWS EC2 describe instances. So basically just, again, we're saying AWS, so invoking the CLI program, then EC2, the service, and then describe instances. Oh, well, I got another error, right? I don't have access to EC2. So I have to go back to Identity and Access Management. Let's add another permission. EC2 full access. And now we should be able to run the command again. Oh, I may have done that a little too fast. It should be pretty instantaneously, but I was probably a little too fast there in hitting the buttons right after I gave myself access. And now we see a JSON formatted output, and let me squeeze this over here so we can get a better look at it here. JSON formatted output of our current instances and all of the attributes for the particular instance. So we take a look at an instance here, and we can see all of the information basically that you would see if you were to come over here. Let's go over to EC2. Click on our instances. All of the information that's listed here. So all of the information that's listed here, that's just basically what I output over here. So now why would you use the AWS CLI? So this is nice, this looks good, this is easy to use. Why would you use the CLI? Well, the CLI really allows for you to have a little more granular control, but it also allows you to do a lot of automation through scripting. So you can create all sorts of scripts and use them to automate processes, backups, and things that you want to do in your AWS environment. So you can set up scripts to automate the starting and stopping of EC2 instances. You can set up cron jobs to set up automatic taking of snapshots of EBS volumes for backup purposes. There's all sorts of various things that you can do through scripting and using the AWS CLI to do that. So in summary, that was just a quick review of how to install, configure, and use the AWS CLI. And with that, we will conclude this lesson. Thank you for watching. You may now move on.